Hi everybody, this is Anne. Many of you out there may have tried making leaf skeletons when you were a kid. To make them, you follow a process where a leaf is soaked in water for a few weeks until the membrane of the leaf breaks down, leaving only the vein structure. I challenged myself to figure out a way to capture the spirit of the skeleton leaves on the surface of my vase. In this video, I'll show you a technique of carving and underglaze washing that worked well to achieve my goal. The leaf skeleton pattern looks very intricate and complicated, but I'll break down the process by drawing a simple blocky leaf design around a stem. To begin with, think about drawing the ace of spades. I then further divided the interior of the leaf by drawing a squirrely line parallel to the border line and attaching it to the bottom of the stem. I did the same thing to the other side. I then drew vein lines from the center stem outward, connecting them to that squirrely line. I then altered the outer border line, giving it more of a reverse scalloped edge. Now here's one I made earlier that I cut out. Now I'm going to use the leaf as my template, so I turned over the drawing and blackened the back of it with graphite of a pencil. I just positioned the template where I wanted it on the vase and traced the lines. Next, I want to carve fine lines. I found that this small bald stylus tool works well for that. When the vase was leather hard, I carved through all the lines that I had traced. Remember, for safety's sake, try and keep the clay dust from becoming airborne by gently swiping the crumbs away or just turning the piece upside down and letting the crumbs fall away. A tip for carving accurate lines is to try and steady your carving hand as much as possible. I do this by holding the piece in my lap with one hand and steadying my carving hand with my pinky on the vase itself, so that I'm grounded. Now here, I've finished carving out all the lines from the blocky template. The next step is to subdivide each of those carved sections. I'm going to start by dividing the inside area between the outer border line and the squirrely line. I figured there might be more deterioration along the leaf border, so there would be looser veining in that area, so I'm carving lines that are farther apart for bigger triangles and rectangles. The next stage is to carve between each of the inner areas. I figure the veining on those areas would be more intact and tighter, so my lines will be closer together and I'll still try and vary the patterns in each section by changing line directions and keeping lines separated so they don't look like they extend into the adjacent spaces. You can see that I use some artistic license by adding veining that radiates out like a flower in some areas, or even squared shape veining. When you're happy with your design, let the piece dry to bone dry. Make sure you've removed as many clay crumbs as possible. Now I'll show you how to do the underglaze wash. I'll be using Amico Jet Black Underglaze. I loaded my yellow sponge with underglaze, then began pouncing it onto the vase and into the grooves that I carved. I'm trying not to swipe a lot. As the moisture from the underglaze re-wets the clay, swiping could cause the clay to dislodge and fill into your carved lines. When I've blackened all the carved lines and the vase is dried, I began to wipe away the underglaze on the surface. Always do a swipe with the damp, clean part of the sponge. You can see that just one wipe will fill the sponge with underglaze, so I turn the sponge over for the next swipe. A good tip is to have a big container of water nearby so you can clean the sponge often. To avoid re-wetting and filling the grooves with clay, I turn the piece and wipe in different sections of the vase each time to let the other sections dry again. I keep wiping and turning until all the surface underglaze is cleaned off. For stubborn areas, I'll gently scrape those away. Now Here's a vase that I completed earlier where you get a better idea of what I meant by looser texture around the outer leaf border areas versus a tighter texture on the inner parts of the leaf. I wanted to keep the theme of the deteriorating leaf by not putting any glaze over or around the center part of the vase. I glazed the inside with my white liner glaze, and on the outer borders of the vase I only added Amico Chino Hibiscus matte glaze. The glaze leaves a rough, leathery look and feel, which I thought was perfect for the theme. Let's try another variation of underglaze washing for the skeleton leaf look. I've already carved my design onto the vase and it's bone dry. I thought I'd try a full color spectrum on the leaf. On a piece of wax paper, I laid down various colors of underglaze side by side, starting with Amico blush. Then the bright red, red-brown, bright orange, intense yellow, pistachio, turquoise blue, baby blue, and then a little of the electric blue. Again, using a clean sponge, I pounced it into the electric blue, then the baby blue beside it. I then pounced the sponge so the blue underglazes filled the top grooves. The electric blue can fire almost black, but if I mix it with baby blue, it lightens it so it'll fire to a prettier blue. Turning the sponge a little, I pounced the edge into the turquoise, then began to pounce under the top section. I like for the sections to overlap a little. I turned the sponge a little more and loaded the pistachio. I pounced that into the grooves. The intense yellow is next. Then the orange goes under the yellow. I added the red-brown to the colors as the brown will fire darker and will add a nice contrast to the lighter colors above it. The red is next. I put the blush on the bottom section mixed in with the red a little bit. I thought the pink might be a little light, so I added a little more blue to darken it. When the underglazes were dry, I used the same damp clean sponging technique like I did before. I love the reveal, especially when it's so colorful. There it is. Really go around the piece, make sure all your lines are still intact and have not washed away. I had to go back and redraw a couple of the lines in. For a variation of the first design, I'm going to use wax resist. I coated the border and the inside of each leaf, making sure I got into all the grooves. I let that dry completely. For the secondary design, I'm going to do a little more carving using the triangle and loop carver. Using the triangle carver, I carved away the center vein of the leaf through the wax. I then started carving random veins from the center stem out to the border line. You don't have to follow the lines you've already carved, because this is a secondary design. I repeated this for each leaf. I used my loop tool to make 2 or 3 carved circles in various parts of each leaf. Now for the underglaze coating. The design is covered with wax, so I don't have to worry about clay filling into the grooves, so I just brushed on the underglaze this time. I made sure that it got into each of the carved grooves. When it's all coated, I began to wash the underglaze from the waxed areas. It's so much easier to clean away from a waxy area. I had a little of the black come off of the circles, so I painted those back in with a detailer brush. Now here's one I made earlier, where I also carved a simple border around the top and bottom after doing the washing. Again, I glazed the interior of the vase with my white liner glaze. I then glazed only on the black areas with Spectrum Majolica black, leaving the interior of each leaf area without any glaze to keep with the deterioration theme. I also like a variety of textures on the surface of my pottery, so the black matte beside the rougher, non-glazed areas are very appealing to me. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.